The offer letter is one page. There's a salary on it. There's a start date. There is a sentence about how excited they are to have you. You read it twice. You said yes. You gave notice at your old job. You started telling people that you were leaving and where you're going. Then, sometime after that, a 20-page agreement shows up in your inbox. The document is the one that decides what your every day is going to look like for the next 3 years. And by the time you're reading it, you've already resigned. That's the order that, unfortunately, this often happens, not because anybody's hiding anything, but because the offer letter is a summary of the compensation and the agreement is the job itself. And almost nobody tells you that these are two different documents doing two different jobs. I'm Candace Elam. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I'm full-time in primary care. This is part 8 of the job behind the offer. Everything up to now in this series has been about finding out what the job actually is. This one is about the paper that makes it binding. So start here because this is a part that surprised me the most when I started reading these contracts and offers carefully. There are at least 3 layers to an offer, and most MPs only ever see one of them before they commit, and it's the offer letter. The salary, the start date, the title, it's a summary and it governs nothing. Then there's the employment agreement, and that is the one that governs. And then there's everything that the agreement points to that it did not attach. The third layer is where I want you to spend your attention because it's where the terms that cost you the most tend to live. An agreement will reference an employee handbook that you've never seen, or a compensation exhibit that's a separate file that they never attach to the email, or a separate call schedule, or a permitted activities list that turns out to be blank, and very often a completely separate repayment agreement that governs the sign-on bonus that you were so happy to receive. That last one deserves its own moment because sign-on money is the most exciting number in an offer, and it's routinely governed by a document that nobody ever sends you up front. The offer says $25,000, and then the separate agreement says, here's the service obligation. Here's what you owe back if you leave early. Here's the monthly amount on top of that. Here's the interest. Here's the part where we take it out of your final paycheck and deduct it from your unused PTO. It's not a scam. It's normal. All that information was just in a different file that was never sent to you. So here's the main thing that I want you to get out of this whole video. The contract is the contract plus everything it points to. If you haven't been handed all of it, then you haven't seen the entire thing that you're agreeing to. You've only seen part of it. And you're allowed to ask for the rest, and you should do so by name. Right now, before you evaluate anything, because a document that you're only allowed to read after you signed is a document that you're being asked to agree to unseen. I've read offers that were entirely reasonable on their own and completely different once the attachments show up. That's not unusual. Now, here's the harder version of this. Let's say you did everything right. You asked about the daily schedule, you asked about the charting time, you asked about how the inbox gets covered when you're out. You got answers and they were good answers. Then the agreement arrives and it is completely silent on all of it. That silence is not neutral. When a term that you were promised out loud is nowhere in the document, the absence itself is the information. It's the single most useful thing that you're going to find in that PDF. And it's the thing that looks like nothing. And when the paper actually contradicts what you were told in the room, you don't have to work out which version is real. The one that's on paper, that's the real version of the job. The paper is what's running on your first day of work, and the person who told you otherwise may not even be there by then. Which brings me to the part that I want you to hear without any bitterness in it, because bitterness will make you read this wrong. The person who has been sitting across from you in that interview, they may have meant every single word that they said, and they may not have had the authority to promise you any of it. The bonus formula, the daily template, the panel size, the block on your calendar, all of those are set by finance, operations, by a scheduling template that somebody built years ago, not by the nurse practitioner who answered your questions warmly and honestly when they took you on a tour of the facility. They told you what they hoped was true, and the systems that actually run your pay and your calendar never even heard that conversation. So the gap between what you were told and what you were handed is not necessarily a lie. It's usually what happens when a promise has no place to live. And this is exactly where the free thing that I built belongs. So let me give it to you now. It is a checklist called Get It in Writing. It's the list of things that need to be on that contract, on that document before you sign, in the categories that actually decide what your week looks like. It's free. It's linked for you in the description. So what is actually in the document? I'm going to name the terrain. I'm not going to read it for you because reading it is a whole skill, and I'd rather tell you the truth about that than pretend that I can hand it to you in 90 seconds or in a YouTube video. Your hours. Does the agreement define your work week, or does it say 40 hours and as necessary to complete duties? Because those are wildly different jobs wearing the same salary. And there's a mechanism underneath that, which if you've seen my other videos, you've heard it before. Nurse practitioners in primary care are exempt salaried employees. The salary covers the role no matter how many hours the role takes. And there's no overtime that kicks in at hour 41. So a fixed salary against an undefined week is a design where every extra hour costs the employer exactly nothing, but it costs you real money because your actual rate per hour is just the salary divided by the hours that you really work. And that as necessary is a blank line that the employer can fill in later. Whether administrative time exists in your contract, not whether someone said it exists, but whether the document actually says so, and whether the document says that the time is protected. Time that anyone can drop a patient into or drop a standing meeting onto is administrative time in name only. The productivity number, whether there is one, whether there's anything that obliges the employer to make it reachable, and what can be added to your role. This is the scope of duties language from the last episode, and what you can do outside the job. Now, people skip this one because they think that they have no plans to moonlight, but read that anyway for the version of you who might need to get a second job later. Malpractice, who carries it, what kind it is, what happens to your coverage on the day that you leave, and what leaving costs. Notice on both sides, whether it's symmetric, restrictive covenants, the repayment agreement that I had mentioned earlier, that's the terrain. 7 areas. Each one of them decides something about your actual life. Each one of them means something specific in that document. Where the line sits between a term that you can sign and a term that you need to reconsider, and which 2 or 3 terms belong in front of an attorney, that is the read. Here's the argument that I want to land for you, and it's all about timing. Changing a term before you sign costs you an email. Changing a term after you sign costs you a lawyer. And that costs you real money that you may not have set aside. And this money that you're paying to the lawyer, it may last for months under terms that you no longer control because most nurse practitioners cannot afford to litigate a contract that has already been signed, which is exactly why the employer's version tends to stand. Not because it's more fair, but because fighting it is more expensive than living with it. So the window between when you get that offer letter and when your signature is on that contract, that is the most leverage you'll ever have with this employer. Not because it's the most that you deserve, but it's the most that you'll ever have. It does not come back later on the same terms. And it definitely does not come back once you're inside the job, feeling depleted and boxed in by a notice period or a non-compete that you already agreed to. One afternoon spent carefully reading it now is the cheapest afternoon in your entire career. And while you're at it, do the arithmetic before you judge the salary. And we did this all in the last video. A bigger number over more hours pays you less than a smaller number over fewer hours. The offer letter is carefully designed to show you only the attractive number. How they answer is data. The last thing, watch how they respond to your questions when you ask. A reasonable employer engages with a specific request They explain a constraint. They'll tell you what they can and can't do and why. This is a normal professional exchange, and they've done it 100 times. An employer who treats a professional question as an insult or tells you that the contract is take it or leave it or pushes you to sign before all of your questions have written answers, they've just shown you something. That's how they will handle a staffing complaint. That's how they'll handle a schedule dispute. That's how they'll handle you raising a patient safety concern 18 months from now. And in this negotiation, you're getting a free preview of your working relationship before you're in it at no cost to you at all. And when someone tells you that a clause is standard, understand what that word is doing. Standard is not a legal category. It's a pressure tactic. Every clause in that document was negotiated before it even reached you by their attorneys on their time for their protection. And you are entitled to negotiate it once it reaches you. So the offer letter is a summary. The employment agreement or the contract, that's the actual job. The document set is bigger than both, and you are allowed to ask for the entire document set before you decide on any of it. If you're holding an offer right now, the offer and contract decision kit is the one that I built exactly for this moment. It helps you to walk through the terms of a typical NP employment agreement, what it actually contains, what each provision does, the range you'll see from reasonable to something that is unacceptable. And it shows you how to find what the offer actually pays based on the real hours that the job requires. And it tells you which clauses belongs in front of a healthcare employment attorney and what to bring to that attorney. There are walkthrough videos where I run the sample offer from start to finish. The link is in the description. The next one is the last in the series, and it helps you to make it all stick. You asked, you got good answers. Every one of them was true when they said it, yet none of what they said actually happened. I'll see you in that next video.